This past week gave us two very different pictures of power. In Washington, a federal appeals court struck down much of President Donald Trump's sweeping tariff policy, throwing years of economic strategy into legal limbo. Overnight, companies on both sides of the Pacific were left wondering how long tariffs can remain a credible weapon if the U.S. Supreme Court must now decide their fate. Meanwhile, in Beijing, the stage was anything but uncertain. President Xi Jinping presided over the largest military parade in China's modern history, flanked by Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un. Hypersonic missiles, nuclear-ready systems, and next-generation drones rolled past as 25 world leaders looked on, including from Iran, Myanmar, and Serbia. It was a spectacle not just of military might, but of alliances, a message that U.S. economic pressure has not isolated China, but instead pushed it deeper into the orbit of other authoritarian and BRICS nations. Together, these two moments underscore a shifting order. America's tools of tariffs are tied up in courtrooms, while China projects resilience and alternative networks of power. And for Taiwan caught between these tectonic forces, the stakes could not be higher. Hi, you're listening to Beyond the Reefs, a show produced by Radio Taiwan International. Here we talk about socioeconomic issues that are faced by Taiwan and their broader impact around the world beyond the reefs of this island nation. Our first story will set the stage for us.
Fight over President Trump's tariffs will likely make it to the Supreme Court. That's because a federal appeals court ruled many of the levies are illegal. However, the court did not immediately block them. For more on this, let's go to Akin Odele, who joins us. He's a deputy editor of newsletter at the Business Insider. Akin, so what could the financial impact be here if the United States in the Supreme Court, if it goes to the Supreme Court and it upholds that decision that's already been made, that Trump's tariffs are illegal?
Thanks for having me, Jerica. So we're seeing a little bit of market reaction today with bond yields selling off and the stock market also, bond yields are rising, which means bonds are selling off, and the market itself is lower, particularly tech stocks. And the worry / the impact is really twofold. One is that if the Supreme Court upholds this ruling, the government loses the tariff revenue that it's already been collecting. And the second thing is that there's a prospect that the government has to repay back some of the revenue that it's collected. And so both things are not good. They would worsen an already tricky financial situation that the U.S. government is in. We know that the debt is at a historically high level, and losing out on this tariff revenue would put a further dent into that. And so if the ruling is upheld, then those are some of the things that investors worry could happen, and markets are kind of pricing in a little bit of the prospect of that. But obviously that remains to be seen if it'll actually be upheld by the court.
I want to talk a little bit more about the economy here. The U.S. workforce lost more than 1.2 million immigrants from January through July, according to a report by the Pew Research Center. So what effect might we see from this in relation to the economy?
So what could happen, and what's already happening, is that the overall supply of labor to the economy is slowing and is low, essentially. And we're in a pretty unusual situation where employers aren't hiring like they used to. We've only created about 35,000 jobs on average over the last 3 months. And now we're seeing the supply of labor also slowing. And it's rare to see both things happening at the same time. That hasn't hit the unemployment rate significantly yet, but the worries that it could, and in Fed Chair Jerome Powell's most recent remarks at Jackson Hole, he flagged that that's a risk that they're watching closely. We'll get the next jobs report on Friday for July, but the risk is that we could see unemployment tick up, and that's because there just aren't enough people to hire, and there also is a slowdown in the demand of workers. Again, that's not happening yet, but that's the risk that the Fed and everyone else should keep an eye on, is the unemployment rate.
We absolutely will. Akin Oyedele, thank you so much.
A recent U.S. appeals court ruling has delivered a serious blow to President Trump's tariff regime. The court affirmed earlier findings that Trump exceeded his authority under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which Congress enacted in 1977 to coordinate responses to national emergencies not to impose sweeping economic penalties. The appeals court has paused implementation of the Liberation Day tariffs, though they remain effective through October 14th as the administration rushes an appeal to the Supreme Court, insisting that revoking them would cause economic catastrophe. Tariff revenues have surged, reaching $159 billion by July, doubling year on year, with a record-setting August haul of $31 billion. This isn't just a legal defeat, it's a structural one. Tariffs have been one of the U.S.'s core tools to rebalance trade and project economic power. But this ruling calls into question whether executive powers alone can sustain such policy levers. For Taiwan, tied deeply into U.S. trade policy, uncertainty now swells on two fronts. Policies may be volatile, and those once deemed treaties and solid can unravel in courtrooms. Taiwan exports roughly 15% of its GDP to the U.S. If tariffs against Taiwan were struck or reversed swiftly, industries from semiconductors to agriculture would face new pricing volatility and supply chain uncertainty. The message could be trade wars now ride on legal interpretations as much as policy aims. Our second story today is about the imminent threat, be it economic or political, facing Taiwan and the U.S.
An evening gala in Beijing Wednesday carries on the message of a massive military parade earlier in the day. China is a global power not to be trifled with. But it's not just China's growing might that has the world's attention. Host Xi Jinping has recently called for a new multipolar world order, a challenge to the United States. And there are signs others who share China's rivalry with the U.S. are getting on board with this vision. Two of Xi's VIP guests and prominent U.S. adversaries, Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, have used the occasion to talk. Their two countries are already bound by a mutual defense treaty, and North Korean troops are helping Russia's war in Ukraine. Before leaving Beijing, the two leaders reaffirmed their growing ties.
Хочу отметить, что ваши воины сражались мужественно и героически. Никогда не забудем и тех жертв, которые понесли ваши вооруженные силы и семьи ваших военнослужащих.
아까도 말씀드렸지만 내가 당신과 러시아 인민을 위해서 할 수 있는 것이 있다면 또 해야 되는 것이 있다면 그 형제적인 그런 의무로 우리가 감당해야 될 의무로 간주하고 모든 걸 다해서 도울 용의가 있습니다.
U.S. President Donald Trump, who'd earlier accused China, Russia, and North Korea of conspiring against the United States, seems to have changed his mind about China's parade.
I thought it was a beautiful ceremony. I thought it was very, very impressive. But I understood the reason they were doing it, and they were hoping I was watching, and I was watching. My relationship with all of them is very good. We're going to find out how good it is over the next week or two.
But in the EU, the event and its undertones of a shifting global order set off alarm bells, especially with Russia's war with Ukraine raging on its doorstep.
Looking at President Xi standing alongside the leaders of Russia, Iran, North Korea in Beijing today, these aren't just anti-Western optics. This is a direct challenge to the international system built on rules. And it's not just symbolic. Russia's war in Ukraine is being sustained by Chinese support.
And in Taiwan, threatened with Chinese invasion, there's concern too. Not so much about direct Russian or North Korean intervention in a war with China, but the ways Russia and North Korea could divert much-needed aid and attention from friendly countries like the U.S. and Japan.
他们之间的团结，或许他不会实质给他援助，但是当不幸战争发生的时候，他只要把会援助我们的对手的力量牵制住，其实我们的压力就很大，我们就变成是我们要独自的面对这个对岸，就中国的这个压力。
A nuclear-armed bloc to rival the U.S. and the wider West seems like it could be a done deal. The question now is how Western powers respond to Wednesday's developments.
While the U.S. courts debated tariff authority China put power on parade literally, the Victory Day parade in Beijing was not just a military showcase, it was a global statement. Commemorating 80 years since World War II's end, The event featured a sweeping display of China's military might, from hypersonic anti-ship missiles like Yingji-17, -19, and -20 to a fully public triad of nuclear-capable systems. These included Jinglei-1, Julong-3, and Dongfeng 31/61. Underscoring technological reach were reconnaissance drones, underwater autonomous vehicles, and ship-launched unmanned helicopters, all slated for future maritime and cyber warfare theaters. The guest list alone spoke volumes. Leaders from Russia, North Korea, Iran, Myanmar, Serbia, and other nations behind the Belt and Road joined Xi. Only 2 European leaders attended, both from nations openly skeptical of Western dominance. It projected a growing geopolitical axis that counters U.S.-led alliances, especially at a moment when American policy tools appear gridlocked in courts. This is a power play in 3 acts. First, it asserts China's technological and military rise. Second, it signals that economic pressure from the U.S., like tariffs, is losing bite against the backdrop of growing global alliances. Third, it places Taiwan squarely at the center of a hardening ideological and strategic divide. For Taiwan, seeing Xi, Putin, and Kim standing together is chilling. It's not just a show of strength, it's a rehearsal for a world shaped by new blocs. Taiwan's response: lean into partnerships that remain immune to U.S.-China bipolarity and reinforce cross-border resilience, not just for trade, but for defense, diplomacy, and domestic solidarity. Taiwan exports roughly 15% of its GDP to the U.S. If tariffs against Taiwan were struck or reversed swiftly, industries from semiconductors to agriculture would face new pricing volatility and supply chain uncertainty. The message could be, trade wars now ride on legal interpretations as much as policy aims. Now, in light of that, I guess the worst thing that could happen to Taiwan is that the country's lifeline is under threat.
What's the need to know here, specifically on TSMC in China?
Well, this adds yet another speed bump for TSMC and its suppliers in trying to bring equipment, chemicals, and other things that they need for this facility in Nanjing. It is not a major portion of TSMC's overall manufacturing picture. It accounts for a relatively small fraction of the company's revenue, and yet it is symbolically significant because the move mirrors what the U.S. government announced on Friday, and that is that Samsung and SK Hynix would face similar restrictions on their facilities in China going forward. All of this takes effect at the end of the year. They have until December 31st before these new restrictions snap back into effect. What happened in essence, Ed, is that the companies lost what is considered really a blanket waiver, a validated end-user agreement that they were trusted to be able to ship goods and material into those manufacturing facilities in China for chip making. That's ending, and it's part of the U.S. government's broader effort to restrict China's access, even if it's foreign companies making things inside China, to restrict access by China overall to advanced technology.
So, Mike, an additional 1,000 or so licenses are going to have to be processed every single year by US officials. But who does that hamper? Who is the supplier here? Is it I think of ASML in Europe. Is that the knock-on effect we see here?
Well, we could see a knock-on effect on those. We looked into the supplier question at the end of last week, and it will be a little bit of a drag. It's unclear which companies will be affected because it's not just ASML. It's even the chemical makers and other kinds of suppliers that may face some of those speed bumps. Now, as I mentioned, the facility that TSMC is operating in Nanjing is an older grade technology there. It's 16 nanometer chip technology that has been out in the market, Carol, for really a decade. So it may not be the most cutting edge of material, but what we're looking at overall is going to be some delays. This adds, as you noted, 1,000 more permits that may need to be in the pipeline and approved by a government that is really under strain here in Washington from staffing and budget cuts and may not be as enthusiastic about issuing those kinds of approvals. We did see at the end of last week with the Samsung and SK Hynix announcement an indication from the Commerce Department that, look, these approvals are not going to go to any sort of equipment or other supplies that may be used to upgrade or expand capacity at those facilities. So they are interested in keeping things where they are rather than allowing expansion or improvement in technology at those plants.
TSMC is navigating a geopolitical tightrope. On one side, the U.S. Commerce Department has revoked its validated end-user export privilege for its Nanjing plant, meaning TSMC will require case-by-case licenses for U.S. chip-making tools to be sent to China. This aligns TSMC with Samsung and SK Hynix, who also lost their waivers, tightening export compliance burdens, and raising operational costs. TSMC confirmed receipt of the notice and assured stakeholders it is communicating with Washington while monitoring operations to minimize disruptions. Economic Affairs Minister Kung Ming-shin offered public support, stating that if TSMC needs government assistance to maintain operations, Taiwan will fully offer it. But Taiwan's premier chipmaker isn't staying passive. It's also racing ahead with a Europe-focused strategy. TSMC is partnering with Bavaria's government to launch an AI chip R&D center at the Technical University of Munich. With 4.5 million euros in government-backed investment, the center will train Europe's graying chip design talent, focusing on high-performance, customizable AI chips and FinFET methodologies. This complements a TSMC design center already planned at the same university, intended to support clients in automotive, industrial IoT, and AI sectors. This dual strategy, managing tightening U.S. restrictions in China while planting roots in Europe, is a textbook case of geopolitical hedging. The EU represents a valuable tech market with growing aftermarket needs in processors and AI hardware. For Taiwan, it demonstrates the importance of nimble diplomacy, safeguarding existing operations in China while building contingency and partnership infrastructure in other global centers. That flexibility is becoming vital as U.S.-China tech divides deepen, and the game isn't just about chips. It's about where expertise, innovation, and alliances flow next. But how is Taiwan saving the economic stress of its people, especially the young people? Amid global economic shifts, Taiwan is doubling down on social resilience. The Financial Supervisory Commission has updated housing policy to ensure first-time youth applicants for preferential housing loans don't get blocked by lending caps. Under a newly revised rule, effective September 1st, loans issued under this program no longer count against the Banking Act's 30% cap on housing and business lending. This matters. Before the change, some state banks had reached their lending limits and turned away eligible young buyers. By late July, nearly 130,000 households had benefited from this youth-focused scheme, with total loans reaching 990 billion new Taiwan dollars, or about 30 billion 500 million US dollars. Approximately 70% of borrowers were under age 39, demonstrating the program's direct impact on younger generations. Furthermore, borrowers are protected from forced bundling of insurance or other financial products intended only for genuine housing needs, not speculation or product sales. Central Bank Director General Xie Fengying confirmed the loans are meant for urban revitalization and genuine home purchases, not short-term market flipping. Housing affordability often becomes a casualty of global economic disruptions. Job insecurity, inflation, and interest fluctuations hit younger people hardest. Taiwan is proactively cushioning that blow by reinstating lending flexibility and ensuring home access for youth. This move isn't purely social policy, it's strategic investment in stability. A society that keeps its next generation rooted will be more resilient amid global instability. It's a commitment that Taiwan's future won't be sacrificed even while navigating economic tempests. As we step back and look at the stories we've covered today, one theme stands out. Resilience is no longer just about weathering a single crisis. It's about holding steady when storms come from every direction at once. On one side, U.S. tariff policies are tangled in the courts, leaving businesses in Taiwan and beyond to plan for multiple possible futures. On the other side, China is parading not just military hardware, but new alliances, signaling that the global stage is shifting. The truth is, Taiwan cannot control the legal rulings in Washington or the parades in Beijing, but it can control how it prepares at home through resilience, adaptability, and solidarity across generations, and that may prove to be Taiwan's greatest advantage. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Joey Chow, and this has been Beyond the Reefs, produced by Radio Taiwan International. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and as always, keep looking beyond the reefs of this island nation.